We're going to build through the draft. We're going to acquire young, fast, and physical football players. We're going to be selective in free agency, and we're going to connect evaluation with valuation. We're going to have a relentless approach to fix our weakness. We're going to maintain great self-awareness of who we are. We're going to solve problems with open communication and candor. And we're going to consistently put players in position to succeed. And the last thing, the most important piece, is we're going to take the North and never give it back.
Welcome in, Bears fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Hallis Huddle. Jeremy and I got together a little bit earlier than normal, thanks to the 2022 NFL Draft that just ended yesterday. So that's here, obviously, what we're here to talk about. We're going to talk about draft picks. We're going to talk about what the Bears did. Maybe a little peek at what the NFC North did against us, and where did the Bears fall in this whole situation. So going into the draft, we had 6 picks, and we're going to go through and see how that worked out. So follow us and hit the subscribe button for the Hallis Huddle. On Twitter, it's at the Hallis Huddle. The Hallis Huddle anywhere you can find a podcast. And yeah, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Finally got some sleep after the draft chaos. Like, this was one of the busier 4 days periods of my life because I was, working at the Post, and like I podcasted Friday night with the Irish Bears show. Got a little drunk on that show. It was fun.
Nice.
But yeah, now I think we're like a full day out, and I think it's a good time to kind of hop on and get maybe a bit of like a knee-jerk reaction to what the Bears have done in this 3-day period. Also, like, give us a little bit of time to have a level head and like think about the draft as a whole, which I think is important, because I think this is going to be a polarizing draft for a lot of people. I think Ryan Poles did a lot of things that I like, and I think Bears fans will like, and also did a lot of things that I don't like, and I think Bears fans won't like. So we're going to try to find the middle ground here if we can, and just kind of analyze it from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, it's definitely good, I think, to get the reaction now, not necessarily immediately after the draft or right after the first or second round, but I also feel like the further removed I get from the draft, the less emotion I have into it. So I kind of like this is like, this is like the perfect like middle ground where you're focusing with your emotions, but then you had enough time to kind of check yourself a little bit. So I guess let's just get into it then. So obviously they didn't have a first round pick. We sat around on Thursday just waiting to see if they by chance traded up into the first round. The few guys that I thought were worth trading up for, it didn't get low enough, I feel like, in the draft. None of the top receivers got past 20. They were all within the top 20, and then Jahan Dotson was a little bit later, which I know we've talked about a lot on this show.
I think he was like 18 or something like that. He went early. I want to say the Washington picked him like 17 or 18.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. He went 16th overall. 16. You're right.
There you go. First half of the round.
So Treylon Burks was the last one to go, and he went 18th to the Tennessee Titans. So clearly wide receiver was a hot commodity in the beginning of this draft, and no reason to trade up at that point. Some people might have wanted Linderbaum, who went 25 to the Ravens. Honestly, like, I'm okay with them not trading up for a center, even though I loved Linderbaum.
Linderbaum to me kind of would have had to fall into like the early second to actually consider trading up. And I think we kind of knew this going in. It didn't seem like there was any chance that the Bears were going to trade up. Just everything we've seen from Ryan Poles, and it played out, is that he is not the type of dude who is going to, sacrifice picks to get his guy. He's going to wait for the board to come to him, and he's going to do his best to not sell the farm for a specific player. And I think I got to applaud him for that. But then the specific players that he did draft are a lot more interesting, and we're going to have to get to that right now.
Yeah, so with the first pick in the draft for the Chicago Bears, 39th overall, we were holding our breath, waiting to see if they traded back. But honestly, they didn't take too much time, I feel like, with this pick. So I think once they saw that Kyler Gordon was available, that's obviously the pick, cornerback out of Washington. I think once they saw that he was available, it was just one of those things like best player available, probably in a tier alone at that point on their board. It was a pick that I actually projected right after the morning of the day two, right after the first round. I was warning people that corner was probably the way they were going to go. It just, based off of value, it made sense to me. And I loved Andrew Booth. I thought he was the more talented corner, but I felt like Kyler Gordon was the better fit in the Matt Eberflus scheme. So I like the pick. I don't know. What did you think?
Yeah, I like this pick a lot. I mean, Kyler Gordon was, his tape is good. His tape is very good. You can't really debate that. He's really good in coverage. He definitely feels like an Eberflus guy. He's like a willing tackler. He's willing to take on blockers in the run game. He plays with a high motor. It doesn't seem like the whole Lopes thing. I don't really see that being even a little bit of a problem with Kyler Gordon. It seems like very much an Eberflus pick. And I mean, cornerback is an important, I was in the boat that they should just, focus on offense exclusively throughout this draft. But if you are going to take a defensive player, corner and edge rusher are the two most important ones. And I mean, your defense kind of falls apart when you have a guy like Kindle Vildor in there, and that's just, it can't happen again. So I think at this point there was enough offensive talent left on the board that my knee-jerk reaction was like, all right, that's fine. Take your pick of the guy who comes next. That did not so much happen. And this is where I start to, question the Bears process here a little bit. The second pick was Penn State safety Jaquan Brisker, who, I'll say this to start out with. I think he is, if I were to pick one player that the Bears drafted this weekend that is going to be a Pro Bowler, if you told me that one Bears draft pick would be a Pro Bowler in the future, I would probably say Brisker. I mean, this dude can flat out play. He jumps off the screen in tape. He's really good at everything. He is a box safety primarily, but he can cover. He's got really good speed. Kind of similar to Kyler Gordon. He takes on blockers and tackle. He's not shy. He does not shy away from contact. He doesn't really miss a ton of tackles. Very high energy, high motor, enthusiastic player. But George Pickens was on the board. A number of other offensive players that I liked were on the board, and I think you have to really question the value. I think it was a good value pick when you're looking at a team in a vacuum, but when you have two picks in the top two rounds and you don't spend either of them to help your second-year quarterback who has an immense amount of talent, who you invested very heavily in when you traded away your first-round pick, I don't know. It starts to become a question as all right, what are we trying to do here? What's the goal for this team? Do we want to be is this just going to be another Bears team that has a really good defense and kind of skews offense? And obviously they made a lot of offensive line picks later in the day, but I still think it's a fair question. I kind of want to get your thought on after two secondary players were taken in the first two picks.
So again, I love the Kyler Gordon pick. I think now you got Jalen Johnson, Kyler Gordon on the outside. You got Tavon Young, as long as he can stay healthy in the nickel. I think that's how it'll shake out. That alone was enough for me to fix the secondary for 2022. I did not. Okay, so Brisker is, and obviously, again, he must have been the best player on their board. They stuck to the board. After hearing Poles talk later after the draft, you could tell they really stuck to their board. And he's a great player. Like you said, he has a chance to be a Pro Bowler as a rookie. I think he fits the scheme well again. He fits next to Eddie Jackson well. That secondary went from being very weak to probably it's hard to say with two rookies, but it's definitely has the potential of being strong, right? That said, again, if you look at Matt Eberflus's teams in Indianapolis, it's not like they had a lot of big name guys. I mean, they had a couple, right? Like Darius Leonard, obviously, but it's not like they had like the Khalil Macks or the Aaron Donalds of the world. And I felt like you had enough on the defense. They invested more on the defense in free agency. I feel like you had enough on the defense that you should have went offense here. And again, that's just because my rankings, my tiers obviously put the offensive needs higher. I'll let their scouting department do their job. Maybe in 2-3 years, we're talking about this as they have one of the best secondaries in the NFL. It's just hard to picture it right now with how, like you said, you got a second year quarterback. This is the year he needs to take a big jump. If he doesn't take a jump, the chances of him taking a leap in year 3 are very slim. I know everyone says Josh Allen. Josh Allen is an outlier.
Yeah.
He just is. Like you look at other quarterbacks in the NFL who went from year 1 to year 2, didn't really improve, go from year 2 to year 3, you don't see an improvement, you're done. Like, and right now, Justin Fields has basically the same, a little bit less than what he had last year. I mean, I love Darnell Mooney. He played like a wide receiver 1 a lot of last year, but he also, and as bad as Allen Robinson's stats looked, he was at least on the field. The defense had to account for him.
Yeah.
What are they accounting for now? Byron Pringle, who might even be suspended for the first couple of games. Like it was rough to see. Not too much longer after this, George Pickens back to Alec Pierce or Sky Moore. No, yeah,
it was
Alec
3
Pierce,
in a row.
And then back to Sky Moore, 3 in a row. Like,
yeah.
And those were the top guys. And I think Mechie might have went in that round too.
Mechie went before the Bears picked, actually. Yeah. He went at 44 to the Texans, which I thought was a huge reach. So I'm okay with them not, making that pick.
It was. But again, like you said, it's real difficult. There were a few offensive linemen that I liked that were available. Yeah, it's I don't know. I mean, I'm trying to like keep those bear goggles on and be positive, but you could ask my buddies who we were talking. I was actually at I'm sorry. For this, I was at home and I was on the computer getting ready to write, but we were chatting back and forth. And my initial response was, all right, Mike Florio was right. The Bears just don't care about Justin Fields. Like they're going to keep doing what they do and live in the 80s.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fair to kind of have some sort of middle ground between like, oh, they don't care about Justin Fields at all and trust the process entirely. I think it obviously falls. I think it's like, I think the idea that the team doesn't care about Justin Fields is a little ridiculous because they obviously, like, Poles and Eberflus wouldn't have taken this job if they didn't at least believe in him a little bit. And I think they want to get him talent, but I think the process here was like, you need to get starters in the first 2 or 3 rounds, basically. And after that, it's all depth and kind of taking swings and hoping guys develop. I think you needed a starter in the wide receiver room way more than you needed a starter in the safety room. And the fact that Pickens was there, Pierce was there, who I'm not as high on, but I wouldn't have hated the pick. Sky Moore was there, who I'm very high on. I mean, those are guys that could have stepped in and made a difference for Justin Fields week 1, maybe not week 1, week 3, week 4. Like these are guys that you want to have like a pass catching group that's on the same timeline as your quarterback. So they stick around for a really long time. They develop chemistry. Like this was the perfect chance to go for a guy like George Pickens, who, like, yes, there's all these red flag stuff. Like I don't really know how much I buy into it. It could be. I mean, the Steelers ended up selecting him. The Steelers are good at scouting wide receivers. You've seen it every year. They just come up with guys in the 2nd and 3rd round. The fact that they're willing to take a chance on him says a lot about his potential in the NFL. And yeah, Jaquan Brisker could become a perennial Pro Bowler, but safeties don't impact that many plays, definitely not as much as wide receivers, especially for what defenses have to adjust for when you put the guys on the field. And I thought this was a really wasted opportunity to get a really talented pass catcher in there to help out your quarterback, who you invested heavily in. And it's just like, even if Jaquan Brisker becomes a really good player, I'm not going to ever really sign off on this move, especially if George Pickens becomes a productive NFL wide receiver, which I really think he's going to do. So it is what it is. I don't like the pick. I'm sorry. Like I was on the Irish Bear show this weekend, and I was kind of being accused of being a little too negative, but it just doesn't seem like good process, because you need Justin Fields to develop, and you need him to develop now. And who's he throwing to?
Right now, Mitch Trubisky, I know he's got Kenny Pickett right behind him, right? But Mitch Trubisky has a much better
Oh my God, it's not even
skill
close.
set around him, right? Like now,
the Packers don't have a good receiving room, but they took multiple swings. They traded up for Christian Watson, the process there maybe not 100% perfect, because they need to win right now, and I don't know if he's going to be developed enough to kind of make a huge difference week one. But then they took Romeo Doubs in the 5th round. They took the guy from Nebraska, Samori Toure, in the 7th. That's 3 guys. The Bears brought in 1. And I think it's just as important, if not more important, for them to kind of like beef up. You talk about the other mediocre to bad wide receiver rooms in the league. I mean, the Falcons took Drake London 8th overall. Like, they don't really have a young quarterback they need to develop. Well, Desmond Ridder theoretically, but I don't know. It just doesn't seem the process here. You have to question it.
Well, and I talked about, and we've talked about on this show, and I wrote about it, about you got to get a wide receiver within the top 100. The chances of those guys hitting outside of the top 100 are just so much lower. I mean, it just, from a statistic standpoint, it just drops drastically. And everyone will say, well, that happens at every position. But wide receiver skill positions, it happens more at, right? Like offensive linemen, you constantly get guys in the 5th, 6th round that, like the Trey Smiths of the world, who just, are good football players, and you can count on them. Now Chicago did take a receiver in the top 100. It wasn't who I thought. I'll be honest, prior to the draft, I did very, very, very little research on Velus Jones.
Yeah. Out of Tennessee. He's gonna be 25 when the season starts.
Yeah.
So I mean, this is a guy that, if I'm not mistaken, was at Alabama or one of those big programs for several years. USC, right. Didn't get a ton of playing time, played there for a while, transferred to Tennessee, and had immediate eligibility and played pretty well. He had 807 receiving yards, 62 receptions in his last year. But this guy was he was 24 when he was doing this. He's way more physically advanced than the 20-year-olds that he's going up against. So it's definitely a red flag when he's not producing until he becomes, bigger and stronger biologically and physically than the guys he's going up against. And I like in the draft, going for younger guys, because they have, especially in the later rounds, like not in the first couple rounds when they're not going to play, when they're going to play right away. Like when you're looking for developmental prospects, you want guys with some sort of an age buffer, because, they'll grow into themselves and become more productive. Theoretically, maybe you do get to pay Velus Jones a rookie contract on what would be his prime. So that's the other way of thinking about it. But I don't think he's good enough now to, really think that that's a reasonable expectation. I don't know. What's your evaluation of Jones?
So immediately after I started researching him more, when you look at him as a player and what I think they're going to try to do with him in the offense, the first name that comes to mind is Deebo Samuel. And I tweeted about this, and I said, look, you can compare him in the sense that that's what they're going to want to do with him, but you can't say he's going to be Deebo. You just can't. Deebo seems to be like a guy in his own, and he doesn't even like his scheme. The usage that he's getting right now, he's wanting out of San Francisco because he hates taking all the hits that he takes running the ball. But I think that's what they're going to probably try to do, at least in this rookie season. Obviously, they're going to use him in the return game. He was one of the best returners in NCAAF last year. But I can't help but see Jalen Tolbert go to the Dallas Cowboys, 15 picks later.
Yeah.
And the Cowboys have been a wide receiver factory, right? I know they brought in Amari Cooper to be a trade, but Cedric Wilson,
Gallup.
Yeah, Michael Gallup. That was a guy most of us wanted here in Chicago had he hit the free agency market. I don't hate the pick. I think that they did it more based out of need at that point. Because if you look at who else was left, I mean, there's a lot of just, to me, at wide receiver, it was kind of like dart throws at that point.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the second round. Like maybe hindsight 2020, they should have went after a George Pickens or Alec Pierce at that point, and or Sky Moore at that point, because now, I mean, it just, again, we can't really grade the draft for another at least I say 1 to 2 years, because I feel like players nowadays are instantly put in positions to play. Some people say you need at least 3 years, but it's going to be a little bit, and we're going to have to see. I don't think anyone that they drafted from a positional or a skill position standpoint on the offensive side of the ball is going to make a difference in 2022. And will we see a development lag for Justin Fields because of it? And that's going to be frustrating.
Yeah. Another thing that I agree with everything you just said there. Another thing that kind of worries me about this pick is Velus Jones he's like a manufactured touch guy. He's not a polished route runner by any means. He's not a guy who can, line up against a number one cornerback. He, like, the whole Deebo Samuel thing is like, you want to use him like Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel's an electric, fantastic player. And Velus Jones is really good after the catch. Like, you're going to use him on these like wide receiver slot bubble screens and, like reverses. And he is a really good athlete. But in terms of guys you have on the roster who can, run a full, like, stable of routes, who do you have besides Darnell Mooney? Like, Pringle is a slot receiver. He's somewhat limited. Equinemius St. Brown is not good. Who else? Like, they got David Moore, who's a good deep threat. Daz Newsome, we have no idea what he is at this point. Like, he might not be anything. So what kind of offense can you design with players like this? It's going to have to be a lot of gadget stuff. And I don't think that's really what you want your second year developing quarterback. I mean, it's fine. Like, at least, like, the scheme is going to be better than what it was last year. Like, there's no question. And I don't know much about Luke Getsy. No one really does, but I definitely think that he is a guy that, has had a good eye for wide receivers and has been able to develop them very well over the past few years. And I think he'll probably be able to design an offense where you can use Velus Jones from week one. I just don't know. I don't know what this offense is going to look like. I think we're running out of opportunities to get receivers in there that can make a difference. And there's still some guys left on the free agent market. I really hope they go after them, and they signed a good amount of undrafted free agents, but I don't know. I think the process of only giving your second year quarterback one receiver who is not a pure X wideout is not great process.
I mean, they still don't even have an X.
Yeah.
And when we look at the free agency, I mean, the top guy out there is obviously Jarvis Landry. He's not an X either. I mean,
Odell's injured, probably not going to be able to play week one. I don't think they're going to give him big money. It's like, it's coming down to like Keelan Cole and Will Fuller are our last hope, which
I mean, I would honestly take a dart throw on Fuller at this point. I wouldn't
me too. Absolutely.
Give him 5 and throw him out there. Whatever. At this point, they need to spend some money.
Yeah.
But that kind of, like, could you have gotten Tyrann Mathieu, like, and then not had Brisker, and then had like a George Pickens? Like, to me, that just sounds better. I know the scheme fit isn't the same. He's not, as much of a box safety as Brisker's projected to be, but
he can do it, and he's a good player. Like, I think that makes sense too. And like, I saw someone tweet, I forget who it was during the draft. It was like, if the Bears had drafted Antoine Winfield instead of Cole Kmet 2 years ago, they wouldn't have needed to draft Brisker instead of George Pickens. And it's just like a cycle of pain that Ryan Pace just put us in, and it's just unfortunate.
It's true. Well, that was it for day 2, right? So that was if I was to give them an early grade, I'm going to give them like probably a B-, just because they are getting 2 starters. They are improving the secondary. And like you said, if we're looking at the team in a vacuum, trying not to think about Justin Fields progressing, at least those guys bring something to the table. Like, they're going to be out there, and Velus Jones is probably going to see some action too. So it makes sense that they found guys to play. It's just not the route that obviously we would have taken. But then we go on to day 3, and Ryan Poles did what we thought he was going to do, or at least try to do. And I do think he did try, because if you look at the second rounder and the third round pick, the clock got pretty low.
Yeah.
So I think they were trying to wheel and deal, try to move back, and just things didn't work out. And that had a lot to do with the quarterback class, right? Like, no one wanted to move up for a quarterback. Not a single quarterback went in the second round, only one in the first round. So that had a big part in it. But he finally traded back, and he traded back a lot. The first trade that he made didn't even have anything to do with trading back. It was more like a trade up, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
They traded the 6th round pick they got with the Khalil Mack trade for 2 seventh round picks this year. They basically went back to Los Angeles. I almost called them San Diego. To Los Angeles and said, hey, we don't want that 6th round pick next year. Can we get 2 of your 7th rounders this year instead? And that's basically what happened. I wasn't excited about that, to be honest. 7th round picks mean nothing to me. They're just dart throws.
And it's conditional 7th rounders too. There were picks 254 and 255, which are like 8 picks away from Mr. Irrelevant. So this is basically priority undrafted free agent territory.
That's exactly what it was. And to me, I'm fine with them just trying to get UDFAs when they become available at that point. Granted, a 6th round pick doesn't usually, I mean, not everyone can be Tom Brady.
Yeah.
But 5th rounders, like, to me, it's 1st through 5th round. That's how I view the draft. Anything outside of the 5th round is just a big crapshoot, and even the 5th round becomes a crapshoot too. What did you think about the other trades, though? Like,
yeah, so this is where you have to give Ryan Poles credit, because this is what we wanted him to do from the beginning, and like it's really amazing that this draft class was 5 picks before the Khalil Mack trade, and it ended up being 11. So you basically got 6 more players. You got rid of Khalil Mack, which is obviously a big loss. Like, you can't just pretend that was a free addition there. This guy turned into Brisker. But they were doing this draft like I do the PFF mock draft simulator. They were just trading down at every pick, and they just got an extra pick with every single one of them. And look, this is what you're supposed to do, especially when you have a rebuilding roster. And let's not front here. This is what the Bears are. The Bears are rebuilding. Ryan Pace really put them in a tough spot. At this point, you gotta gamble on athletic traits and go for quantity as much as quality, because a lot of these guys aren't going to pan out. A lot of these guys aren't going to be on the team in a couple of years, but one of them might be. And the more swings you take, the better chance that one of them actually ends up being pretty good. And I actually really like the guys they ended up going with. I mean, like, Braxton Jones is, I think, definitely the guy I like the most. This is a guy that just, by all accounts, is a really good player. And he, like, obviously, like a lot of young guys, he needs to improve his technique, but he is athletic. He possesses a lot of really good skills in the run game and the pass. Like, his pass protection probably needs a little bit of work, but this is a guy that, I think he's going to play. And this is one of the, like, there were a couple offensive linemen that I liked in the board that I had done more research on, but the more I read about Jones, the more I really like what he has to offer. And I think this was a really nice pickup. And then the pick they made after that, Dominique Robinson, an edge rusher, a lot of pass rushing upside there. And I was really impressed that they decided to go for an edge rusher instead of an interior 3 technique pass rusher, which seems like they had been obsessed with. And I was like tweeting nonstop about this. I was like, they're going to end up, wasting money or wasting draft capital on an interior pass rusher when edge is way more valuable just because of the fit in the Eberflus defense. They didn't do that. And you got to give him credit for that. And Dominique Robinson, I think, can turn into a pretty productive pass rusher in the NFL if they just kind of hone him in on that. I don't think he's going to be a 3-down run stopper guy, but you need pass rush, and you got to give him credit for that.
Yeah. So going back to the Braxton Jones pick, I love that pick too, especially from a scheme fit. Like, he's not going to be a power running offensive lineman. He doesn't have the strength for it. And that's the one knock that I had on him compared to some of the other guys who I felt were not as scheme dependent, like guys who could probably excel more in a gap scheme, but also were strong enough to be in the power scheme. And there was, like you said, there were some names there. Jameer Salaire, he dropped so much. I don't know if there was medicals on that or what, but definitely a stronger guy on tape than Braxton Jones. But when you're running a gap offense or a zone blocking scheme, you're not necessarily needing to have that raw power as much. So I think the fit here is perfect. I think he could probably push to be a swing tackle this year.
By the way, sorry, did I say that I like his did I say I like his run blocking better than his pass blocking? So I like his pass blocking better than his run blocking. I might have misspoke there.
You flipped it.
Yeah, that's not true at all. Like he's a good pass protector. He's a good pass protector.
Yeah, he's got pretty good bend, I feel like, right?
Yeah. You're right. He's the, I mean, I have all these notes with like, Zach Thomas. That's the kind of the guy I think I was thinking about there. He had
to be used with the
actual Zach Thomas
linebacker.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Braxton Jones is an NFL ready pass protector. And I think the run blocking and the kind of, stuff they want him to do, what they want kind of, run blocking guards to do in this offense, in this, West Coast, get out and run zone scheme. I think that's going to take some work. So he's probably not going to be like, I don't think he's a guy that's going to move to right guard, that starting right guard position, but I don't know. He has a lot of, like, you need to just get as many of these guys you can in the building and see what they have to offer.
Exactly. Like I said earlier, you got a dartboard. The more darts you have,
right,
the better chance you're going to have it hitting a bullseye, right? Dominique Robinson was a guy that I had mentioned in my article leading up between day 2 and day 3 as a guy to potentially grab. Very, very raw. This guy was a wide receiver prior to being a lineman. I think he had 33 catches as a wide receiver leading into 2021. And he's going to be, what was that rotational guy that the Bears had years ago? Michael, something Anderson. He had like 12 sacks his rookie year because he was just like a rotational guy. I think it was with Peppers and might have been a Goonlier at the time. That's how far back we're going.
Mark Anderson,
yes. I think that's what you're going to probably see here from Robinson. He's going to get his time to just go in on third down and get to the quarterback. It's not going to like you're going to see him on an every down play. But yeah, that guy was a guy I was excited about. Zach Thomas, that was again just another body for me.
But this is what I was talking about when I like him in the run game. Like he's a very good run blocker, and he fits this the zone blocking scheme that the Bears want to run, and they need guys like that. And again, it's just you're taking a chance on some traits and some, if you see a guy that has a fit in what you want to do and you like think he's good enough at the other stuff, you take a chance on that guy in the 5th round anytime. So like these are, I really liked all these dart throws, and I think one of them probably will end up panning out, and maybe all of them can contribute in some small way. Like if they ended up with just, 2 picks in the 5th round and that was it, I would have been like, all right, what are you doing here? But, I like the idea of, adding different guys who can do different things well.
Yeah. I had nothing else really to add to this. I mean, we could go guy by guy, but it's just really no point at this point.
Let's just quickly touch on the other guys they picked up in the 6th and 7th rounds. So Tristan Abner, they say running back. He's kind of like a running back, wide receiver, slot receiver type of guy. Like I think he's going to be mostly used in the passing game. Has good speed, good missed tackle ability. Don't hate that pick. Doug Cramer, another offensive lineman, and Ja'Tyre Carter is an HBCU guy who graded really well in terms of PFF. I think that's another guy that theoretically could contribute. Elijah Hicks, a safety that fell in the draft. You don't really anticipate him, making too many plays right away. And then they drafted a punter, which I'm not thrilled about because, like, I don't know who you're fighting for punters in the UDFA market.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't know who else was there that would have made much of a difference at that point, but
yeah, that's fair.
So Cramer, I think, is going to be one of those guys who just kind of sits. You got Lucas Patrick. Cramer's probably going to be more of a center guard, obviously. But if he can sit and just maybe take over in 2 years, like that'd be fantastic. He's more powerful than like Sam Mustipher just right off the bat. I liked Carter. I liked that pick a lot. I think it was Brandon Thorne was talking about him at the Senior Bowl, and just like was able to he was able to like take on better competition, and he held his own. So yeah, again, a lot of like, and so Ryan Poles clearly has a body type and like a mentality of what he wants to see from his offensive linemen. These guys are all like tall, like 6'4" to 6'7" range, and they're light. They're like in the low 300s, like 310, 305. He clearly has a body mentality of what he wants to see from his offensive line, and they're all athletic, and I think that goes to the scheme fit because they're able to move a little bit better. So it's just a matter of seeing how this shakes out. I mean, this offensive line could be good if Borum and Tevin Jenkins hit. Then we don't have to worry about it as much. You find your right guard and you move on. But if one of those guys falter, then hopefully one of these guys can step in.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give them credit for taking a lot of swings at the offensive line, which it's fair to say that that's just as much of a concern as the wide receiver room was going in. And, you can't really try to tackle both of them and have quick fixes everywhere. I do wish that they had taken a receiver with that second pick, and I'm never going to go off that take. Like, that's just kind of my opinion. And I don't know if it's going to age particularly well, but, I think this, yeah. All right, let's give the whole grade the draft as a whole letter grade. I'm gonna go B, just a solid B. Took care of business. Would have liked a little bit more out of the first few picks, but you really do like what he did in the later rounds of the draft. So what's your grade here?
I'm gonna stick with a B minus. Like I said, for the day 2 picks, I feel like it carried over for the whole draft. I didn't get excited about the move to get into the 7th. I gave them the Elijah Hicks and Trenton Gill picks. I mean, I would have rather had the 6th rounder next year.
Yeah, I might be with you there.
Like you said, they signed a bunch of UDFAs already, some wide receivers. I think a couple offensive linemen, a tight end. So they're doing their work. They're doing their job. They're going to have bodies. As I love that they got extra draft picks, moving back, still kept 2 5th-round picks, added a bunch of 6th and a 7th, and overall, I mean, I don't think anyone can fault us for giving them a B and a B minus. I mean, that's pretty optimistic. I think anyone who's doing anything more than that's being a little unrealistic.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a middle ground between, like ending Justin Fields' career after one season because the Bears didn't draft a 2nd-round wide receiver, and just blindly praising everything that the team has done, because there's legitimate concern here. And I'm not going to say that like you could have solved the offense in one draft, but I do think you could have done more. And I think despite everything they did in the 2nd and 3rd day of the draft, you can't really go higher than a B for an overall grade. But yeah, so that's pretty much all we got for the day. And this was obviously kind of like a surface level talking about each player, like somewhat individually. What we're going to do is, we're going to go back, watch some tape, maybe bring in some guys that, know what they're talking about a little more than we do, and kind of eventually have a little bit more of an in-depth conversation about what this Bears draft class looked like. I think we both kind of deserve a little bit of a break from making shows for like a little bit. So you might not hear from us right away, but we'll be back at some point soon, and we'll kind of get really deep into what the Bears are going to put out on the field, and hopefully there'll be some free agent signings in the next week or two. Hopefully at the wide receiver position. But that's pretty much all I got. Anything else you got?
No, maybe they trade, right? Ryan Poles keeps talking about trading. I don't know. Maybe they do. Maybe now that they got Robinson as an edge, they're like, hey, let's get rid of Quinn and bring in a receiver to replace him, right?
That'd be pretty chill. I would like that.
But I guess if something crazy happens, we'll do like an impromptu emergency podcast. But yeah, there's really nothing to talk about from now until probably June.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys like baseball and the NBA playoffs, because
right,
pretty much all we got. We got some tennis, we got some golf, we got some sports.
Yeah.
All right, that's all from me. And as always, bear down.